Hello, everybody, and welcome to a very special discussion today on project management. And I am so very happy to be joined today by Mr. Sunil Prashara, who is the president and CEO of the Project Management Institute, an organization that the Canada School of Public Service has been working with over the last 18 months or so to forge better linkages between the Institute and the Canada School. I'm particularly excited by this topic because for me, project management is one of the absolute key skills that any public servant needs in order to do their job well. Because at the end of the day, project management just means getting things done with the resources that you have. And government is very good at kind of announcing things. Government is very good at setting objectives. Government is very good at articulating what we're going to do in the future, but governments across the world are less good at actually executing those objectives. And there's a lot that we can learn from the discipline of project management. That's a discipline that spans the world and it spans professions. So Sunil, what brought you to this world of project management?
Well, first of all, it's a real pleasure to be here and talking to you, Taki. So thank you so much for giving me the opportunity. Yeah, so I have been working for coming up to 30 odd years. And to be perfectly honest, from the day I left university, and in fact, even when I was at university, I was doing projects. I just didn't realize that that's what they were. My career has spanned a number of different professions. I'm a qualified accountant. I worked in sales. I've worked all over the world. I've worked in operations for different organizations. And I even had my own company for a while as well. And there's one thing that's really interesting is that no matter what I was doing, I was always doing some form of project, whether I was in finance and I was running a budgeting cycle, or whether I was in sales and managing a number of sales initiatives. They were always projects. And it wasn't until I actually got into operations at Vodafone and I was leading it was a massive $18 billion transformation initiative across the entire Vodafone, which is a telecoms company based in the UK. But it's actually a global organization. Did I realize that actually all the work that I was doing and I was expected to do was a project. So that's when I realized that actually you could be a sales guy, you can be a finance guy, you can do all of these things. But if you can't execute and if you can't deliver, then the sales guy can't make the promises that he's making or she's making to their clients. And the finance guy's got nothing to count because there's no money, right? Or there's an overspend or whatever. And the key role in all of this, the glue that makes any organization, enterprise, whether it's public sector or private sector, it's the execution engine that sits in an organization that makes everything happen. And that's when I realized that actually, I would like to get more involved in the project management arena. And then I sort of found out about the Project Management Institute, and I was lucky enough to have the skills that they were looking for. I've been the president and CEO for about 19 months now, and I'm loving it. It's a great role.
Yeah, so that's exactly right, because as I said, we're all project managers, whether we're in the public sector or the private sector, whether we're executives, whether we're the heads of an organization, or whether we're in the bowels of an organization. Project management really is just what you said, which is getting things done, executing. And for me, the only nuance I would add is executing against an objective and executing in terms of allocating the resources that you have against that objective. So tell us a little bit about the Project Management Institute per se before we dig into project management. What does the Project Management Institute do?
So its number one agenda, if you like, is to help enable people with the best skill sets in order for them to execute on their projects, regardless of what industry group they're in, regardless of what kind of project that they're working on. We actually feel project skills are skills that you actually acquire from a very early on in your life. And we call it the 5 to 75 paradigm. 5 years old all the way up to 75. Even when you're 5 years old, you're learning skills which are you can develop, like how do you manage your parents is like how do you manage stakeholders? How much time do I spend playing Xbox versus doing homework. These are all kind of like we call them life skills, right? And what project management does is hone those skills specifically to projects, right? And as you go through your career, it becomes relevant for you, no matter what you're doing, right up to the point where you might eventually become a chief transformation officer or a strategic officer or even the COO who is making big things happen, possibly even transforming an organization. So the Project Management Institute is largely focused on helping people to have the skill sets and the competence and the skill sets required to make a difference so they remain relevant. And they turn ideas and plans into reality. That's their kind of claim to fame. That's what they do. And it's an absolutely critical skill, especially now in the world we find ourselves now. And one of the other things about the Project Management Institute, it's a global organization. It's not for profits, but it's also not for losses. But it's not for profit. And it's been around for 50 years. We're in our 51st year now. We have well over 1.6 million certifications. Our secret sauce actually is a team of volunteers. We have over 12,000 volunteers that are part of our engine of enablement, advocacy, etc. And we operate out of about 302 different chapters around the world. And we work with all sorts of organizations right across the board, large, small, some very big organizations, as well as a number of governments as well, both the US and Canada, obviously, but then also US and the Middle East and Argentina, all over the world. So we pool our thinking together when it comes to project work, whether you're building a dam or you're creating a software application, whatever it is, we bring all that knowledge together in one location, which is the Project Management Institute, and then we share best practices around the world in the forms of standards, in the forms of certifications, examinations, best practices, lessons learned, so on and so forth. So that's what we do.
So you're saying something incredible. So what you're saying is, whether you're an engineer, whether you're an accountant, whether you're a banker, whether you're dealing in a billion-dollar project or managing your mom and your dad or managing your homework, there's a lot of commonalities in these skills. So start telling us some of these commonalities.
Sure. So first of all, I think that traditionally, when you look at project management, and especially PMI, the Project Management Institute, kind of cut its teeth with what's called, the waterfall technique of project management, which is what the lion's share of investment around the world is still, even to this day, being invested in. So infrastructure, construction, projects where where you're starting from, where you need to get to, and there's a finite amount of resource and time frame in which to do that. And that's your traditional project. But the way of working has changed dramatically over the last 50 years, not only because of massive improvements in technology, but also the types of projects that are being created. So technology helping enable the more traditional projects, but then recently, or not so recently now, but you saw the movement in the agile world, application development, where you don't really know what the outcome is, and you do it in an iterative way to sort of develop, the ultimate sort of application, if you like, and then organizations saying, hey, that's a different way of working. Could we not apply that to the whole enterprise, where we're working in a volatile environment, or we're being disrupted by competition or whatever? And I'm not really sure about what the end result is, but it's better than what I've got today. So can I work in an iterative fashion? So we start to see the development of different forms of work, different ways of working. And one of the things that PMI has been doing is saying, hey, how do we keep track with all the different ways, whether it's a waterfall way of working, or an agile way of working, or a hybrid way of working, or a Kanban way of working, or whatever the different ways are. And so you've seen that one of the things that's happened is this mass movement towards different ways of working, finding the way that suits you and your operation, as well as the project that you're trying to execute on, or the initiative that you're trying to work on. It may not be a project. So, and that requires different skills. So first of all, you'll always find some form of governance. You'll always find some form of, scheduling and planning. But a lot of that work is being automated and codified and systemized. And as a result of that, that's freeing up project managers to think more about what additional skills they can possibly have. And especially now with COVID-19, you're starting to see the development of, and it's actually been happening way before then, but with all this transformation that's going on and the digital transformation that's going on around the world, which has been accelerated because of COVID, and with the use of different technologies to help you, you're seeing the development of new softer skills, which we at PMI call the power skills or even the super skills. And various different institutes and organizations are saying these are really important skills. And these are skills like collaborative leadership, empathy, critical thinking, creative mindset, cultural awareness, the ability to be humble, but at the same time directive, being able to pivot and being able to change. These are typically what, normally when I was applying for jobs, I'd have soft skills as one section on my CV, which would be about, I'd just relegate it to one line because I had to fit everything onto one size of paper, and I'd put most of my emphasis on my experience. Well, that's actually changing, and people are more interested in organizations, governments, as well as private sector are interested in your soft skills, because they know that much of the project sort of system, the codified elements of it are being systemized and codified. And so people are looking for, how can you motivate teams that are working cross borders, cross function? How can you motivate people how can you multitask multiple operations and have the bandwidth to be able to see what are the key issues on all of this? How can you be empathetic in a world that is really beyond VUCA now, beyond volatile, uncertain, and more, accustomed to shocks and the need to act at speed? How can you keep your people motivated and then the wheels don't fall off? These are different skill sets, leadership skill sets that people are now seeing. So we call them the power skills. I mean, the McKinsey actually before COVID wrote a report saying the three most, in fact, they had like the top 10 skills. And the first one was obviously critical thinking and analytical skills. But the third skill that for the future, for the next 20 years or so, was specifically project management. And just, I think it was 4 days ago, the World Economic Forum ran a huge program over 3-4 days where they were talking about the skills of the future. And even there, when you look at what are the top 10 skills, the different element power skills, like collaborative leadership, like critical thinking, like innovation, like empowerment, like cultural awareness, are all bubbling up to the surface. So these are the more relevant skill sets. Of course, you need to have structure, and of course, you need to have governance, and of course, you need to be able to schedule and plan and look at risks and all this kind of stuff. But a lot of that is being codified, and there's a lot of technology out there to support people in that side of the skills set that you need. So hopefully that gives you a sort of
yeah. So now I want to take a step back. So you're joining us from London, and I'm here in Ottawa. I think it's fair to say over the last kind of quarter century, we've each had our more than our fair share of kind of spectacular failures in project management. I remember when I started my career in the Government of Canada, we were trying to, back then we called it commercialize. We were trying to commercialize via rail and to reimagine our passenger rail system. And we spent a lot of time looking at what you guys had done in the UK on your rail system in terms of like franchises. And then we studied the channel, and we studied all these projects where the budget was supposed to be X, and then it ended up being, 10X. And we started watching these projects that were supposed to take 2 years. And, 17 years later, they were constantly being rescoped and rescoped and rescoped. And that's not to pick on the UK, because we've had more than our share in Canada of those. So if this is a discipline, how come we don't have such a great track record at this? So I guess I'm starting to get at the kind of this is something we've been studying for a while. This is something that companies do every day, which is start new initiatives. Governments build transit systems, they build airports, they build bridges, they build roads. Shouldn't we be better at this by now?
Yeah, I mean, it's a fantastic question, and of course we should be. And frankly, when you look at the number of projects that are being conducted now in a very structured way, we probably have across the globe improved significantly. However, when you look at how much money is being spent already, I mean, even we do what's called the pulse of the profession, where we look at every single industry group across the globe, and we look how are we performing? How is the world performing when it comes to delivery and execution? And we find that even to this day, trillions of dollars are wasted. About 11% of the investment that goes into infrastructure projects across the globe is just wasted money. It just gets repeated. Got it wrong, all sorts of different things happen. That's been relatively consistent as a percentage, but in absolute terms, the number, there's been a proliferation of projects as the world is becoming more and more projectified. Knowledge is now being kept within computers, so you don't need to keep it in your head anymore, and it's the application of that knowledge which is becoming more important. And I think you are starting to see that in certain sectors that there is an improvement in the way projects are executed. For sure, I think there are root causes. Like, for example, it's very difficult to be able to plan for every single eventuality. People are still putting a 10%, 20% contingency on all of their budgets because of that uncertainty factor. And uncertainties today are more prevalent than they were, I would argue, given what's happening around the world with some major geopolitical issues, as well as natural issues, as well as things like COVID is just an example of something that we're having to deal with that we just didn't even dream about. Even though there were contingency plans and risk registers and everything, people were still caught, in trouble, and their businesses are on their knees. So I think that's one part of it. I think the other thing I would say is that the reason why we haven't seen a material improvement is because of the complexity of projects, where projects are now being done not just locally, but by remote teams. And that's not just now because of COVID. That's been happening over a long period of time. So I think these are the reasons. It's also another reason why not one particular way of working might necessarily be the same applicable way of working for other projects. And so that's why I think organizations around the world are saying we need to be able to choose the way of working that is relevant to us as an organization and as relevant to our people, rather than just having one specific prescribed way of working. So I think organizations and governments are recognizing that they can make huge improvements here. Yeah. And they're looking for different ways to do that.
One of the reasons why projects go off the rail is I think there's a lot of kind of bait and switch going on in the public sector. And what I mean by that is people really want you to buy into the idea as a government or as a minister or as a treasury board or as a finance department. And then kind of once you buy into the idea, then they've kind of got you. Do you see that a lot? Like, again, going back to when people promised the channel and people said, it will pay for itself in 3 years. And the decision makers say, well, based on the fact that it will pay for itself in 3 years or whatever the case will be, I agree to that idea. But then that idea gets fundamentally transformed as you go forward, and that decision makers would never have bought the idea if they knew that it was going to be a 50-year, payback period or whatever. I think there's some conscious bait and switching going on in the public sector. I'm not sure if that's the case in the private sector, but curious to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, so I think first of all, when you look at the public sector, so PMI does a lot of work in the public sector. So we obviously, we have what's called a Global Executive Council. And within that Global Executive Council, we've got, in Canada, the Department of National Defense, the Treasury Board of Canada, Secretariat, a number of different inputs that come into that. The Global Exec Council is our sensing arm. It's a combination of government bodies as well as private sector, large enterprises that sort of think of it as the think tank, which really helps us figure out these kind of problems. In the public sector, one of the things we see is that many of the infrastructure large programs are multi-year. And when it becomes a multi-year program, once you kick it off, it's very difficult. Any changes to it can be extremely costly, right? And then largely infrastructure, construction type programs that you're fitting out a city, a smart city, or whether you are building a road, that's going from A to B, and all sorts of things can come and get in the way. So I think there's an inherent amount of challenge because they're multi-year programs because of that, right? And then that might span one or two different government parties, if that's the case, especially something like the English Channel. And so the business case needs to be super robust. And I think that therein there's a challenge because technology is moving so fast now. It's outstripping the speed that people are reskilling. And so technology enhancements, AI, machine learning, etc., can make what you are doing or planning to do redundant before you even get there, And people start to pivot and saying, hey, you need to do that. And one of the things we're learning from the private sector, especially because of COVID, is that many organizations were going through a digital transformation. COVID accelerated that ridiculously, and they really jumped down the road of digital transformation. But what came out of that was the need to be able to be super flexible, super nimble, and the ability to be able to pivot on a dime if you have to, if there's a major shock that hits the system. It could be a change in government, it could be COVID, it could be rising water levels, it could be mass increase in population that was unexpected, but a shock to the system, which means that you have to move that fast. I like to call it gymnastic. Organizations need to become more gymnastic. And in fact, because they are acting on a much smaller time frames, many of their programs, they want to get their transformation in 18 months, not 3 years. They may want to go out and build a building, but it needs to be done in 6 months, not 5 years, etc. So they have to be able to pivot a lot faster. I think that the public sector needs to be a little bit more conscientious, and the planning is very, very important. I would imagine, having not worked in that sector, but having spoken to many people that do, that the planning side of it becomes critical, and recognizing all sorts of eventualities becomes super important. Scenarios become very, very important. In a public sector, in the private sector, I think less so of that. I think people just need to be able to pivot at pace.
So one of the key problems, again, coming back to the governmental context, is we have project managers and project implementers on one side, but then we have overseers. And in the private sector, you have a board of directors that oversees big projects. In the government of Canada, you have cabinet committees, you have individual ministers. Tell us some of the skills that are different between kind of the governance of a project as an overseer vis-a-vis the governance of a project as an implementer.
So I think that having what we have within PMI, we looked at this really deeply, and we found that there are kind of like three key, we call it the talent triangle. And we say there are three key sort of elements that are very, very important. First of all, and if you're managing and have oversight over a number of programs and projects, one is having technical understanding of project management, and we've developed that even further to say actually it's beyond that. It's actually having a technical understanding of different ways of working, whether it's agile, whether it's waterfall, whether it's citizen developer, or any of these different areas of working. What are the different approaches? I think leadership should have an understanding. Certainly when you're looking after 4 or 5 different programs, if they're all the same, then they may all be using the same methodology. But if they're not all the same, you might want to be using different methodologies. So one side of our talent triangle focuses on that, and we have a lot of thinking in that space and best practices and standards and certifications. The other area is skills, leadership skills. And within there, and traditionally we've been saying it's project leadership skills, but we're now saying it's beyond that. It's the power skills. It's those things I was talking about: collaborative leadership, getting the most out of your people, being empathetic, being mentorable as well as being a mentor. So not having the ego that says, I know it and the way I'm doing it is the best way, but learning from your teams as well and enabling your teams. We've created that side of the triangle beyond just leadership, and we call it the power skills. And the third part of the triangle used to be around strategic intent and what is the purpose of having a great understanding of the purpose of the programs or the projects that you have oversight to. We're actually saying that have to go beyond the purpose and the strategic intent. We're actually saying you need to have business acumen, and in its truest form, really understanding what is the value that's going to be created here, and if it's public money, is this public money well spent? Is the outcome, am I confident it's going to happen at the time it's going to happen, and is it going to be sufficient enough for me to say that this is of value? And then being able to prioritize the different programs and stack rank them in terms of value that's being created, the value streams that I'm working on. So it's actually a combination of traditional methodologies plus your own business acumen that helps you choose the right way of working. I think that in answer to your question, somebody who has oversight of multiple programs. I was very lucky at Vodafone when I was there. I had 65 programs all running at the same time across 23 different countries. Okay, it's private sector, but the project value was $18 billion over a 7-year period, spending $1.8 billion in the first year. And every quarter, the finance teams would say, hey, we've changed the budgets around. You've got 10% less than what you had before. And so then within that quarter, I'd have to jig all of those 64 different programs. And I say, which was giving me the most value? If I had to take 10% out, where would I take it out from, and what's going to fall down? It's a constant iteration of optimizing. Now, you would think that would result in absolute chaos. 1 minute you start working on something, and the next minute you stop. But actually it doesn't. It keeps you grounded. It keeps you focused on the outcome you're trying to achieve. And as long as you're aware that you don't want to kick off something, and if you do kick off something, you're going to have to see it through to the end. As long as you know that, then you know that part of the programs or the 6-job programs you can't touch because it's already sunk cost. It's gone. So having that awareness, that business acumen, is a third part of the talent triangle. I think is really, really important. So there are 3 sort of areas of focus for broader people. Yeah.
So you talked about kind of the soft skills, a little bit on the technical side. Now let's move into something that you guys are more and more interested in, which is kind of the audience for the projects. And PMI talks about something called citizen development. So talk to us a little bit about that.
So citizen development actually is a movement that's been sort of growing over the last 3-4 years. And in essence, what is citizen development? It's the ability to be able to create software applications without the need to have any coding language whatsoever. So you don't need to know about Java, SQL, Python. You don't need to know about these languages if you have what's called a low-code, no-code platform from which you can then create your own applications. So if you understand a workflow, if you understand a process, and you can understand it from end to end, whilst you map out that process, the application is created in the background for you, the codification of it. So you don't actually need to know it. The best example, or the best akin example, is something like an Excel spreadsheet. You don't know the intricacies of how an Excel spreadsheet works, but everybody knows that if I add, this number to that number, I'll get the result in this other cell. So you kind of like know how to. Everyone has some rudimentary understanding of how spreadsheets work, and some people, like in finance, will know a lot more. But others will also be able to create their own budgets for home and all that kind of stuff, right? So citizen developer is the ability for any citizen to be able to develop code without the need for any application development. That's why it's called citizen developer. And what that means, if you think about it, is anyone in any organization can create solutions. Which typically they would pass on to the IT department, who never has the bandwidth to be able to handle that particular, or it may not be as material for them as some of the big stuff that they're working on. So it never gets done. And what we are seeing is Microsoft is saying that by 2030, there will be then 500 million applications created around the world, of which 450 million of them will be done on this kind of no-code, low-code platform created by citizen developers. It means there's going to be a proliferation of projects. Every department, finance, HR, legal, operations, sales, planning, governance, they're all going to start get enabled with how to create solutions to their problems without having to go to a third party or to an IT department, etc. And as long as you have the guardrails of what you can and can't do and what application to use to do this, which is what IT is worried about, then go knock yourself out. Go and create your solutions. Go and create your applications. There will be a mass production of projects. Huge. It's already happening. Some of the facts, Forrester is saying that, that there's going to be a shortage of proper software developers by 2025 by 500,000. That's a lot of software. And so organizations, software companies are all saying, hey, if they're all being disrupted by this, they're saying, hey, if other organizations have got the ability to be able to create their own solutions, then we also should be able to do that. By the way, this kind of technology shaves hours, days off a typical software development. It takes what used to take 10 people to do, you can now do it with 3. It's a massive reduction in the resources required to do this, and it's a huge cost saving. So enterprises, businesses, governments are saying, hey, this is great. This is enabling my people to be able to go out and solve problems and create solutions, etc. I need the guardrails. Because if I don't have the guardrails, there'll be chaos. They'll be using different applications. They'll be using different platforms. They won't be integrated. They won't take into account the security issues, the data issues, the version control. You all know what it's like when someone's created an incredible spreadsheet and then all of a sudden the business changes and that person's left. And you've got this spreadsheet which used to be critical to the business and nobody understands how it's been created. They don't want that kind of shadow IT type event happening. And so we see a huge development in a new way of working that's already started. It's accelerating like crazy, and we wanted to be in front of that. So we can end up saying, hey, we are now the Project Management Institute, and we look at all different ways of working, and this is another one, a really big one. And that's why we're in the developer space.
So I want to poke you a little bit in terms of, as somebody who does and oversees projects, what are some of the things that are red flags that people look at and go, oh, I'm not sure this project is on track? Because one of the problems that we have is the notion of sunk costs. And once kind of you're kind of in, but at some point, decision makers have to pull the trigger. What are some of the red flags that a project is not being executed properly?
I think, it's obviously cost overruns is an important one. I think delays in the standard ones, obviously. Cost overruns is a big one. Delays in achieving milestones is another one. Having lots of people show up at a meeting, multiple meetings and all of the minute that starts to happen, as far as I'm concerned, there's something going on here. And multiple meetings is another one. Multiple trials of specific areas is another one. Lack of communication when everyone goes quiet is another one. That's a big one. When all of a sudden you're not hearing about status reports or it's all under control and it's not. I mean, that to me is a real big one. These are classic ones, practical ones, which I felt when I was learning about project management myself, that very much human skills are your first sign that something's wrong. When you see stressed out people staying late at night, a lot of conference calls going on, lots of sidebar meetings, lots of status meetings, people working longer than they should be. These things start to raise my eyebrows. I've seen it myself. We went through a digital transformation during COVID, and we were midway through that. And I sensed it there. People were burning out. They were anxious. They were scared. The project timelines were slipping. The productivity level was going up, but the efficiency level was going down. And you could sense it straight away. So there are some of the things. I mean, and then obviously, the sunk cost. The art of project management is minimizing sunk cost, right? And I used to, before I even got into project management, I used to say, especially in sales, which is a form of project management, I used to say that if it's not going to cost me any money, don't make a decision, and hold to the last minute and then push. And I don't know whether that works in project management now. It certainly works in digital transformation. When you absolutely know you've got to go, and there's a compelling reason to do it, then you go, and then it's a sunk cost. So
now, you mentioned digital transformation as we all have kind of failures on the project management side. I think it's fair to say empirically across the world that digital projects are the ones that more often than not go even more off the rails. Why do you think that's the case?
Yeah, 30 to 40% of digital transformations fail. And, I think that figure will now get better because organizations have to move to digital transformation. I think part of the reason why there is a problem here is a digital transformation is not just a technical transformation, it's also a change in mindset. I mean, if I look in the Project Management Institute, we have gone from in the last 18 months, from an underinvested infrastructure and an administration function to a very digital organization. The technology side of it, everyone loves. Oh, the implementation, everyone loves. We need a new ERP system. Oh, yeah, let's go for it. Let's put it in. We need an SPX system. We need a new CRM system. Everybody enjoys doing all of that stuff because it's good. It's like building Lego, and we love it. The hard bit is the usage of it. How do I use it? How do I capitalize on it? And that is a mind shift. What can I do with this now? That is a big, big challenge. Getting adoption of some of the digitization is one big challenge. The other one is over-reliance on contractors. A lot of organizations rely on contractors to do the work and come in, they'll do the digital transformation and they leave and they forget that the impact that has on people who haven't designed it. They haven't been involved. They've been watching to say, okay, when am I going to take over? And by the way, what I've been left with is not the way I want to do my work. So there's a challenge there. Also, not being clear on outcomes that you're trying to achieve. Sometimes there's some whiz-bang type of technology that just sounds so cool that you're going to use it, but there's no real business case for it. So actually understanding what is the outcome you're going to try to achieve, what is the value that's going to be created? Is it going to improve my relationship with my stakeholders? Is it going to give me more revenue? Is it going to make me more efficient? Is it going to be more productive? What is the outcome I'm trying to achieve? And if I know that, how can I quantify that? How can I measure it? And then am I confident that's going to do that? These kind of discussions often get overlooked because of the desire to go and build something that's unique, that's new, that's different. A lot of organizations, we have what we call a transformation compass, which looks at all of these different factors. It's within our bright line. If you go on our website, you'll see it. It's brilliant and it's free. Gives organizations and public sector a view of what are the 4, 5, 10 reasons why transformations fail, from the voices of CTOs, CIOs, CEOs who have failed in their transformations. And they call out these points that I'm just raising to you now. So these are the ones. And, we also just went through this digital transformation. And boy, it's hard to do the transformation, the actual execution and the integration.
Yeah.
Harder to get the adoption.
Exactly. So if you're a decision maker out here, and there's about 4,000 people that are watching this broadcast, but if you're a decision maker, if you hear the word transformation in a proposal, run like the wind. Run as far away as you can from the proposal and as quickly as you can from the proposal, because anybody who sells or is trying to sell a transformation is somebody who's basically telling you that they can turn a cat into a dog, or they can turn a dog into a pigeon. That's what a transformation is. What you really want to hear from your counterparty is more the notion of evolution, more the notion of this is better than what you've got, this will meet your needs, this, as Sunil is saying, this works for your customer, this adds value to your business. If you're looking for a transformation, you should look at yourself a little bit too as the customer, because basically what you're saying is, I want some magic beans. I'm at the point where I need magic beans because my underlying business isn't working as well. What are your thoughts on that, Sunil?
Well, I think that, transformation has many different tentacles. If you're doing a digital transformation, there may be very good reason for you to do that. Technology is moving very, very fast. You're getting, a lot of repetitive tasks are being automated. A lot of cognitive thinking is being codified. AI is playing a big role. I like to think of it as, humans working with machines, almost like Iron Man versus Terminator, where Terminator is trying to, take out all the humans. I genuinely think there's value in that, in the Iron Man scenario. And I think that being technically savvy is a prerequisite for project management in the future. I don't think you should be frightened of transformation. It's going to happen, and you will find other ways of doing stuff because technology is moving very, very fast. So I don't think you're turning dogs into cats. I do think that in the enterprise world, in the private sector, that is happening now, where airlines are saying, hey, well, hang on a minute, if I can't fly anymore because of COVID, what am I going to be? And, if I'm a restaurant and no one's coming to my restaurant, I run a pub in England and nobody's coming, what am I going to be? They have to completely transform themselves, and that is a transformation, and some of them are going to do it and some of them are not. Many industries, like the oil and gas sector right now, don't see any kind of recovery in the foreseeable future. So they are completely thinking, well, how do I change my business model? Totally. Now, I'm not sure that's the same kind of situation in government, but you will find better ways of doing things. You will find that actually you're coming out with some idea, some plan, a smart city, for example, and if you don't get it done in a certain time, the payback period for that is diminished because technology is moving so fast. So absolutely, technology creates transformation and change. One shouldn't run a mile away from it. One should be aware of all the different things that are happening and apply the ones that they think are most suitable for them in their organization. Don't run away from it. And don't be scared. Of course, recognize that 30% of transformations fail. Knowing that fact, and that is 3 times more than a traditional project, which is 10%, right? Know that and know why, and then know what skill sets that you've got that can be complemented by technology before you embark on it. That's what I mean by being empathetic, and that's what I mean by being humble, and these are power skills.